Good evening, Demon fans, and welcome back to the Demon Land podcast. My name is Andy, and after a start so poor it looked like this podcast was heading for an early autopsy, the Demons somehow flipped a 43-point deficit into a 23-point win. From all but gone to game on, and then game over for Carlton. Joining me tonight to dissect the miracle at the G is George. Good evening, George.
Good evening, Andy. Good evening to our listeners. Sorry for the delay getting us up and running tonight. I think Bin Man's on a dial-up internet of some sort out in the western suburbs. But what a great game that was for everyone. I think, if I remember, Andy, you have an ongoing bet with friends of yours who are Carlton supporters.
It's not quite that. I have a bet with some family members who are Geelong supporters, but I do have a lot of friends who are Carlton supporters. So, I took it easy on them. I'm not going to, there might have been some Schadenfreude in my head, but I'm not going to, we're not in no position at the moment to be gloating too hard. So I kept it
I think you can with Carlton the way they're going. So
I kept it fairly subdued.
Enjoy it while you're in front. They do it to us, so...
That's true, and just on our starting late for the live show, I think B-Man has been hanging out with the D's too much, and he's had a very slow start, and he is joining us tonight to unpack the Great Blue MCG heist, and that's B-Man. Good evening, B-Man.
Good evening, Andy. Good evening, George. Good evening, Demon Landers, up and about. But, George, it's south by southwest. I'm over in Altona, and nothing wrong with the west, but we're southwest down here, and what a fantastic win. And I wasn't able to go. I was away for the weekend, and so I'm really keen to hear what your guys' take was. But I can tell you the club's contacted me, and they've asked me never to go to a Carlton game again because, causation. I've been to every single one of those heartbreaking losses over the last 5 years. I don't go to one and we win. I'm no statistician, but 100% of the times I haven't been to see Melbourne play Carlton in the last 5 years, we've won. So that's probably the last time I'm going to see Carlton, Melbourne live.
Perhaps don't go to any more games for the rest of the year, man. I think that's a winning strategy. We do have some comments that we had got from some of our listeners and members of Demonland. GS77, he wrote, "Is the lid off?" I don't know. I think it's a bit early to say whether the lid's off. I don't think we've beaten anyone. If we beat Gold Coast this week, maybe the lid can come off, but I think it's got to stay firmly closed at the moment. Clintosaurus asks, "Did any of you leave early?" Well, Big Man didn't even arrive, so that's one. I will say, when we were 43 points down and had kicked 1 point or whatever, I had it in my head, and I sort of said to my dad, "I'll tell you what, if at halftime we're 50 or 60 points down, I might consider it. Definitely three-quarter time if we were that amount, I might." I don't usually leave that early. I've left late in the last quarter many a time, I will admit that. But yeah, what a comeback. George, you obviously didn't leave early.
No, I didn't leave early, and that's what really, really surprised me about this game. I've been to a lot of football games over the years, when we've been on the winning side, the losing side, but I have never seen anything like the exit of the Carlton fans in this game. It was just unbelievable. In that last quarter, if you have a look at the replay, it's interesting, and it was highlighted in various news programs over the last 48 hours. They were 2 goals in front. Sorry, they were 20 points up with 13 minutes to go in that final quarter. Even with 4 minutes and 30 seconds to go, we're only 11 points up. We'd certainly come back, from 43 points down, but it was 4 minutes 30, 11. It was 2 kicks the difference. And the Carlton fans were already leaving the ground.
They knew.
Looking at it and going, why are they leaving? There's not even 2 goals difference. And, in the first quarter alone, in the last 90 seconds, they kicked 2 goals. And they're going, I'm thinking, why are they leaving? What is going on here? And then certainly with 3 minutes 30 to go, when we're now 17 points up, it was a tsunami of Carlton fans leaving. I have never seen anything like that, short of a team that might be down by 10 goals in the last quarter and absolutely no chance of winning a game. But I've never seen so many Carlton fans leaving the ground with a game of potentially still in the balance. And even in that last 90 seconds or so, Mackay had a shot for goal that he missed. But again, that would have brought him back within 2 goals. And we know certainly from our own experience that 90 seconds you can score 3 goals, let alone the 2. But it was just incredible to see. And what was really painful for the Carlton players was, and I do admire them for this, was they stayed on the ground, to help us celebrate the 250th game for Gawn and TMax.
Well, you sort of don't have any choice in that matter. They have to stay on for that.
Yeah, but they stayed in the ground longer than what their fans did, know, so which was remarkable. The other thing that really struck me, and there's been some commentary and vision of Michael Voss on the sidelines, it was just incredible. When the tide turned, he stands on the sidelines like a statue. His arms are folded. He's not up in the top deck with his assistants finding out what's going on or handing out instructions. He doesn't have headphones on. He's not receiving the information from upstairs,
and he's not engaging with the players either.
It's not. No, that was the next thing. Yeah. He's not engaging with the players. The players are down one end, and he's up the other end, and that is in sharp contrast with. Sorry,
he had his arms folded. Yeah, bad body language.
Yeah, it's in sharp contrast with people like Fagan and even Goody, who were right in the players' ears as they're coming on and off the ground. They've got headphones on, taking instructions or handing instructions out. There's just nothing going on there, and I can't see a future for him. And I mean, even when we get into the discussion about the game, surely as a coach, you would put someone in the vicinity of Kozzy Pickett. He ripped them absolutely apart, and he was just let to run seemingly for the certainly 3/4 of the game. No changes. So it was just incredible what was happening in the off the ground as equally as what was happening on the ground. But like I said, I've never seen fans leave a game so in droves like was at this game.
I think that must be their version of CFC SS. They are so scarred. It's damaged them completely. I think they know we don't. Our MFCSS, or my MFCSS, certainly not Big Man's, isn't quite that. Well, I just know if we're 40 points up. I wish we were 40 points up all the time. Yeah, we don't have that. They know they're 40 points up, that there's a good chance they're not going to win. Big Man.
I reckon Voss George probably could see his coaching life flash before his eyes.
Well, he knows that too.
I mean, I take your point, and also it was interesting that I didn't pick that up, George. That's a really good point. That no headphones, so no. I'm guessing at some stage he probably did, but he didn't in that end. And
but the end, they still had a chance. He was doing that as when they still could have saved the game or at least wrestled it back. He just wasn't communicating. It was like, I've given up. I'll let the tsunami wash over me.
It's funny actually, because watching the game, I felt like we dominated the last 3/4, and we didn't put the score on this board in the second quarter, but we dominated, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But so it felt inevitable that we would get in front. But I've watched the replay 2.5 times now, the full replay twice, and the second half once. And exactly as I said, George, both times I've watched the replay, all 3 times I've watched the replay, I get a surprise that it's with 7 minutes to go, they're up. It's but it felt inevitable, and I think it's sort of like a self-perpetuating thing. But just on leaving early, I don't think I can I don't reckon I've ever left a game early. I just think it's not on. And Andy, you shouldn't admit it in polite company. It's just not on. The only time I had is I had to go to a funeral in a Saints Melbourne game a number of years ago, and I reckon that's a reasonable reason. But I still went to the first half. But it's like it's just not on. And and Blues, heading home, and my experience.
I'm not talking. I wouldn't leave in there where they were that situation. So I'm talking. We've been belted. We're 80 points down. With a few minutes to go, 8 minutes to go. I was like, I want to get to the train station. I've got things to do.
No, you've got to. It's part of the contract. You've got to stay to the bitter end. I was thinking of both of you guys, and I was thinking about what a beautiful day it was in Blues, and I was up at Echuca, and I couldn't get back in time to see the game, and so my plan was to watch it as live, and I had the most frustrating sort of match experience. I couldn't get KO to work; it kept on dropping out, it kept on jumping around. And so I had to, and then it wouldn't work at all. So I had to bail, and I bailed it like halfway through the second quarter, or maybe 10 minutes, thinking, my God, what's happening? I happened to look at my phone. I got a message from a Melbourne fan thinking, oh my God, we've just been smashed here. I couldn't get back on till about like 9 o'clock to watch it. And then it was, we're in this game. And it was, super win. I wish I was there for all of the pain. Would have washed away some of those losses and exciting. What did we score? 14 goals in the second half. Kings bringing fun back to the footy. It's, like Andy, you said at the beginning of the podcast season that, last year you admit that the last couple of years were a bit grind with the losses, and it's a lot more fun doing a podcast about football when you perform that way, two, in an exciting manner, but two, when you roll, one of the hated teams, the Blues.
Well, real supporters actually turn up to matches, Bin Man. So, Doug Reamer had written, how good was it to shove it up the beep of that overrated one-trick pony, Patrick Yips? I almost jumped through the TV and wanted to rip his head off after he shoved Tolstrup when he was on the ground. To watch us come back and rip their little pea hearts out and get up for Max and TMax was beautiful. They can have their 80 to 100,000 members. One thing they'll never have is beep backbone. Because they haven't been able to buy one since the mid-90s. Can the D's. And I must say, I went on a bit of a impromptu down the rabbit hole on YouTube on Sunday evening. I was just doing a couple of things on my computer. I had YouTube up, and all these I don't know if Melbourne supporters have this, but Carlton supporters seem to have a plethora of them, these fan cams after the game where supporters get on YouTube. Someone, has a podcast, but, obviously a visual video podcast on YouTube, and they bring up video callers on the thing, and it was Carlton one. So it was just fan after fan after fan just ripping into the coach, to the players. And I must say, there was a bit of Schadenfreude in me getting a bit of a kick out of it, watching it all. But I could sympathise with them because, as I said, we haven't really been there where we've been that team up by 40 points. Well, we had it last year once, but it's happening to them all the time. But, yeah, they are angry. They're filthy. They and there was just some the club down.
Comedy gold, Andy. Sorry, there's some comedy gold with the the Blues radio.
That is, as I posted on, to just hook it directly into my veins like some heroin. Yeah. I could watch Blues radio when they blow a lead like that every day of the week. That is just... And did you watch the 30-minute one that they released? They had a little clip at first on Twitter or Facebook, whatever, they put it up, where there was just some highlights. But if you watch the 30-minute one, they show them in the first quarter. They are smarting like they've won the flag, the way they were all up and about. It was Andy Marr, it was Sam Edmund, who I don't mind Sam Edmund too much. I don't mind him out of there. They had Christou and Kuda, and I don't mind those two either. I always liked them as footballers, and even though they were the enemy, I sort of admired them as footballers. But they were all they thought they'd won the flag, and they're only playing Melbourne, who's in we're in our mini rebuild phase. Big man won't agree. They were up and about.
Rebuild.
To watch them you could see Andy Marr as the game's going and slipping away, and they even knew from the first goal we had kicked that it might start slipping away. You could actually see his heart breaking in real time, and that talk about Schadenfreude. That gave me a hit. Sorry,
I had to laugh. He said something like, the clip I heard was, I'm not one to bag my team, or I'm not going to bag my team. But that was embarrassing with a capital E.
Yeah.
And then he goes on to say total trash. And I was thinking, that made me laugh. That's in terms of comebacks. Where does it sit for you guys in terms of our comebacks?
Well, so that
top 5 of all time.
We're coming up to that now. So Bigfoot writes, what an awesome comeback that was. Not going to lie, but I thought we were in a lot of trouble at quarter and half time. As impressive as our comeback was, what I was super impressed with was after we got to within a goal, after Paddy Cross's goal early in the last, Carlton then kicked 2 goals and got to 20 points up with 13 minutes to go. We then piled on 7 goals in the remaining time. Unbelievable. Where does that rate in the D's greatest comebacks for you? And so our biggest comeback, you said it was in the top 5, big man. The biggest one was the 51-point turnaround against Fremantle. That was in 2008, the Austin Wanamiri game. There was also a 47-point comeback against North in 1934, but since none of us was there, we'll move past that one. And I was barely even alive. I was probably about 1 years old when we had a 46-point comeback against St Kilda in 1977. You boys would have been young lads at that time. But for me, it's the 44-point comeback against Geelong in the final round of 2021. That's never going to be top. Max Gawn kicking the winner after the siren to seal the minor premiership and launch our drought-breaking flag run is as good as it gets. I carried on around the house like such a maniac that my wife actually thought we were being burgled. And but the win out over Carlton the other day, it was special, no doubt about that. But it wasn't minor premiership into a flag special. And even if you add the extra 23 points, the 66-point turnaround, I don't think it adds. It compares to the 21 one. And it was a little bit sweeter knowing that we've put another crack in the fragile psyche of my Carlton mates and every Blues supporter who had given me grief in my childhood while Melbourne was struggling and they were busy celebrating success. So you guys, where does it sit in terms of favours comebacks, George?
I was there for the Fremantle one. That was spectacular to watch because we had a pretty ordinary side in those days.
Yeah.
And so seeing that was something very special. Not so much comebacks, but the games that we were never entitled to win. And again, the best one, I think, was actually when Kozzy kicked that goal against Carlton as well. I think it was only last year or the year before when it was the same sort of scenario, 3 goals down with about 2 minutes to go or something ridiculous. And Kozzy absolutely broke the heart of the Carlton supporters and the ones behind the goals, throwing things on the ground, and so that was worthwhile to see because we had no right whatsoever to win that particular game. But certainly, this one has to stand amongst them. We'll talk about the goings on in the game, but I said to the person who was sitting next to me at the game halfway through the second quarter, I said, they've stopped. They have absolutely stopped. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But, so it was just a matter of time almost. It took us a little while to get the wheels turning. But this was very, very pleasurable with the end result. And especially when, like it's been pointed out, and as I said before, there was 20 points difference. They were 20 points up at the 13-minute mark, and we still got over the line by a couple of goals. So, it was a big turnaround. Great to watch.
Ben, where does it rate for you?
Well, it makes a difference if you're there, I reckon, because of the emotion and the I have a soft spot for that Freo one too because we were woeful in that period, and it's one of the few games of footy I've been to with my son, who is only a little tacker, and maybe I put him on footy because I don't think I've ever been to a game since with him in that Freo win. But you can't top the Geelong one. I mean, we win that game, the Geelong that was in COVID, so we're all watching from home, and so ironically, I didn't see that one live either.
But we still felt that. It's still.
Oh, totally. Well, just the way that game ended as well, with the free kick on the boundary line and the way we took it, the cleverness to hit up. Who was it? Was it Maxi?
It was Lever to Maxi.
Max to
leave it to Maxi, and the fact that we ended up winning, so that put us on top of the ladder, meant that we went to Adelaide. It was. Yeah. You could argue that historically teams that finish top often don't win, but that year gave us a massive advantage because it meant that we had our camp. We were able to get to Perth early by going via Adelaide. That it's hard to top that one. That was an incredible win, and I was also going bananas. But I mean, this is right up there. I mean, it's at 150. We're the oldest football club in the world. 150 odd years. What is it? 1852. Since 1852, that's the fifth best comeback of all time. That's something to celebrate
for the D's.
For the D's. I mean, of course, like that's I'm only think about the D's.
Yes. Maybe next week you'll get to the game. Sorry
about.
I'm away for. Having said that, I'm away for 3 weeks.
With you disappearing, 10 minutes into the last quarter.
Not 10 minutes, maybe with 10 minutes to go.
Right.
And I'm still watching on my phone, at least. Give me a break.
No, you can't walk it back now.
All right, let's just do some housekeeping and go through a review that we received each week. I invite our loyal listeners to support the podcast by leaving us a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcasts. We truly appreciate your feedback, and as a token of our gratitude, we give a well-deserved shout-out to those who take the time to share their reviews. And Willie D writes, quality work, genuine appreciation to George, Andy and B-Man for the type of analysis that just isn't available in mainstream media. Since tuning into the podcast, I look at footy in a completely different way. While pundits point to the obvious or take a contrary position just for the sake of it, this is intelligent commentary with just the right amount of bias. Beyond the analysis, they also respectfully unpack the game and they play the ball and not the man. Sincere gratitude for the time and effort you all put in. Where there is care, there is quality. Thanks for that feedback, Wiley D. Much appreciated. Keep that feedback coming in 2026. Simply leave us a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcasts, and we will give you a shout out on the show. And as I mentioned, I'll be away for the next few weeks, so don't worry. You'll still be able to get your Demonland podcast fix with the Stats Files, presented by our very own Bin Man. The Stats Files is the companion podcast to the show in the Demonland podcast universe, with Bin Man breaking down the stats that matter each and every week. It's a long-form deep dive into the numbers behind the game, the ones that help tell the story of a brilliant win or a disappointing loss. And you can find Bin Man's Stats Files in the Demonland podcast feed, usually dropping on a Tuesday or Wednesday, and I'm sure it'll be dropping on Wednesday this week as we're a day late for the podcast. And while I'm away, I won't be able to do the pods for the Suns game, the Bombers or the Lions games. I'll be at the Suns game, but I won't be available to record afterwards, and I'll be back for Anzac Eve clash against the Tigers, so that will be when I'm back. But in the meantime, Bin Man's going to keep things going with the Stats Files. We haven't yet decided whether he'll also take a couple of questions from the weekly podcast thread, but we'll see how that develops. So there'll still be some content coming out of the Demonland podcast universe over the next few weeks, just in a slightly different format to usual. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and X. And if you want to leave feedback, ask a question, share a comment for the show, jump in our weekly podcast post or send us a DM. And don't worry, we won't read out your full name on the air. We do have a few questions amongst our questions today from people from X and from Facebook, so you'll hear them as well. You can listen to the Demonland podcast on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or your favourite podcast app. Just search for Demonland podcast and subscribe. And to connect with fellow D supporters, head on over to demonland.com, sign up for free and join in on the conversation with Demon fans from across Australia and around the world. And if you want to call into the show live, give us a call on 0486 387 929. That number again is 0486 387 929. And if you're listening live on your phone via demonland.com right now, just hit the call button and it should automatically call from your phone app. And during the week, you can call that number, leave a message for us to play on the podcast. And during the week, those calls go straight through to voicemail, so you won't have to speak with a human, and perhaps don't leave a message for the next few weeks until the Tigers game, because I'm not taking that phone with me away. You can listen to the podcast live every week at demonland.com on Monday nights at 8 p.m, but just not for the next 3 weeks. B-Man, now before we start the Stats Files, Did you want me to play something? I do have a question for you as well from someone. But do you want me to play that after the first question we've got for you?
No, play the
first
clip.
one. Yeah.
Oh, no. Ask the question and then play the clip.
Okay. D-Star9 says, a special thank you to B-Man. I'm pretty sure he was on your Stats Files podcast. You were explaining why we will still be seeing the long kicks in our game plan and various other components. At the game, you could see you were absolutely correct with your analysis. I look forward to both the podcast and the Stats Files this week. As supporters, we are extremely lucky to have 2 sensational podcasts every week. Your efforts are very much appreciated. So anything to say about that? Just about
no, other than
kicks, so
much appreciated. And yeah, I mean, it's sort of something I've been sort of talking about both on this and also the other pod is we're a territory team, and King has made that clear. And I'll speak to it in a sec, but yeah, play that clip because it sort of feeds into it. But excuse me, I really appreciate that feedback, D-Star9.
The King clip from the presser.
How'd you pull that one off?
Just belief. Sort of believe in the process, believe the game would turn around if we started to execute the basic fundamentals, which cost us dearly in the first quarter. Thought things started to turn in the halfway through the second. The stats told us that the game was played the way we wanted. We just couldn't capitalise when we had our opportunity. So,
thanks, Kingy. The stats. See, I was hoping you'd be able to sort of put that into some sort of stinger, and then I was going to throw, thanks, Kingy, chuck to the Stats Files.
Is that what? You really gave me zero information of what you wanted me to do with that.
I know.
I'm not a mind reader.
But so I'm. It's really interesting because I saw Kingy speak at a function, and it was sort of it was really interesting from my perspective, and I'll touch on a couple of things that he said through the show at different points where it's relevant. But one of them is for the stats is that he is very someone he said that he's always been felt that stats are super important, and he is super impressed with the analytic team at the D's. Really impressed. He said that he's the most impressive setup for analytics, real-time analytics, game time analytics, post-game analytics that he's been involved with, and he's been involved with footy for a long time. King, he was very impressive at this function. So. I just thought that was it was interesting to hear him talk about that. And so stats file, bang, I'm going to make this 10 minutes if you want the full experience. Andy, what did you say? Came in just a touch over an hour.
Anyone who doesn't listen to the stats files, and you really should. So Big Man at the start of his last stats files show, his standalone stats files show, he goes something like, I'm going to stick to about 20, maybe 30 minutes. And I'm sort of look down and I can see, I'm listening to it and I can see what the file size is or the time remaining. And the show was over an hour. The file he gave me was over an hour. So, bang on 20 to 30 minutes you were there. But you can make it as long as you want. So
I did.
Not in this show, though.
I wanted. All right, now 10 minutes, my clock starts now.
No. You can go as long as you want.
On this show, I'll focus each week on the player ratings and then talk a little bit about why we won, or in this case, won, or in last week, why we lost, and what the numbers say from that perspective and tell us. But the player ratings, our top 5 player ratings, as quickly as I've talked about often enough, the player ratings is a way of measuring impact of each action, whether it helps your team score or doesn't, as the case may be. Kozzy was unbelievable. There's a question later where we'll drill down on his game, but he was our highest scored player, which is sort of no shock, 23.2 for the match, and all of that was in the second half. All of those points were a phenomenal second half of footy. He only half a point in the first quarter. He was actually minus 1.6 in the second quarter, and if you're wondering how someone gets minus 1.6, for every action, as I said, if the likelihood that's going to cost you goals, or it does cost you goals, then you will lose points. So if you turn over the ball, kick it directly to an opponent, they kick a goal, you lose points. And so he had a pretty average first half, and I heard somewhere that he was like the the 40th ranked player or something, or the 41st ranked player at halftime in so remarkable second half.
He had. It's interesting. So he had 14 possessions and only 3 effective possessions, and that's 21%.
Yeah, that's how you end up with a negative 1.6 rating points, because it's negative impact. It increases the opposition's chances of scoring. Max Gawn, what a season he's having. All up, he's going to win. He's 9th All-Australian. He'll be the only player in AFL history to win 9 All-Australians this year, is my tip, barring injury. Just another phenomenal performance, 18.9. And, I think his second half was, the focus was on Kozzy, but geez, he was so influential in the second half. And George, I was speaking to you earlier in the day, and you were saying that you were impressed with how he was rucking in that second half in terms of doing things a little bit differently. What was that pointing in?
Sorry, just unmuting there. He changed his rucking style, and also subsequently Van Rooyen and Petty, for the one that he was in there, they hit the ball outside this sort of 5 metre perimeter as much as they possibly could. And that that denied effectively people like Walsh and Cripps being able to get the ball, because they're more inside ball getters. And all of a sudden, a whole series of other players were brought into the equation. So we'll talk about that a little bit later on.
I'll just add to that. They were talking about that on one of the footy shows that I'm watching, but they didn't talk about it from the perspective that was a Melbourne decision to do that, whether it was Max Gawn, whether it was a tactical thing by one of the assistant coaches or the coach himself, because he's a ruckman, to deny at the coalface players, those contested balls that they've got, to deny them the footy, that we were hitting it to the outside for our outside runners, and they had no one covering those guys, and we were just taking the ball out that way. So they were talking about that, saying that Carlton did nothing about Melbourne doing that, but they weren't really crediting Melbourne for taking that away from Carlton. They were bagging Carlton for not doing anything about that. Whether their coaches,
I saw it as a very deliberate change.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. It was a good thing from we won because of that. We chose to do that, and we should be getting credit for that rather than being another thing than driving credit us for doing that rather than anyway.
I'm going to reclaim my time.
Sorry, that's not counted. Those few minutes that George and I just took away from you, not counted.
But you're right. And look, I was critical of Jonesy's last year because he was in charge of the midfield. So I reckon that was fair enough. Our midfield structure and setups last year were appalling. So credit where it's due. I'll talk about this in a sec, but in terms of why I think we won the game. And a big part of it was our stoppages were phenomenal, really, in the last the last 3 quarters of the game, given their strength in that. But I think that was a really good point, George, around how Maxi was tapping it and also his direction. But not only did it deny them or mitigate their physical strength at the sort of coalface, what it meant is it was a huge factor in how well Kozzy played, and I reckon a huge factor in how well Sparrow played, because when you watch the replay of those centre clearances, so many of them in that the last 3 quarters, and particularly the second half, because Max was doing that, they were hitting the ball at pace, and you had multiple players running at pace Koz was collecting the ball at speed and had players in front of him who were also running at speed. Because of that, it was getting outside that thing. So fantastic performance by Maxi. He's in phenomenal form, and you could put a case together. This is his best 3 start to a season ever, I reckon. It's been phenomenal. He's been in our top 2 players all season. Bailey Fritsch had his best game for a long, long time, statistically, 17.7 player rating points. Fantastic. 6.4 in the third quarter, 7.2 in the last quarter. Really, really terrific. 86% game time.
Is that because of the goals, though?
Well, of course, scoring goals is big point scorers, but it's not just scoring goals, it's where you score them from. So snapping around the body, it takes into account the likelihood of that being a goal. So he gets good points for that. And he kicked some excellent goals from 40 metres. So, of course, that's a big factor in it. But that also means he didn't turn the ball over and hurt us. And that's how players, as I said, lose points. Mistakes that lead to or could lead to opposition scores. He was terrific in that second half. We'll talk more about Jake Lever a bit later. There's a question about it. But he had his best game in a long, long time, 16.6 player rating points. His last quarter was huge, 5. Importantly, his first and second quarters were huge as well, 4.7 and 6.3. I think it was critical that we didn't let them blow out. A huge tick to our defensive unit. I think in the first half, it was really doing my head in a little bit. It's not surprising, I guess, the way the media works, but all the focus has been on how poorly Carlton played, not on how well we played. We demolished them in the last 3 quarters. I don't care how you want to look at it. We were the better team. We weren't in the first quarter. We were horrid, but our defensive unit saved our bacon in that first quarter. I mean, saw what Freo did to us, and we gifted those last 2 goals in the last 90 seconds of that first quarter, but I thought the back 7 was absolutely massive in this game, and particularly the first quarter, led by Jake Lever. And Cade Chandler again had a great game. He rounded out our top 5. He had 15.8 player rating points, 83% game time. Just quickly, Jake Lever was 100% game time. Tommy Sparrow, he came in 6th, and Jack Steele, terrific game. And another one I wanted to highlight was Jai Cully. He had 12.9. He was our 8th. He was terrific. And Ed Langdon. So, we had a lot of good players. Tommy McDonald in his 250th game, one of my all-time favourite Ds. Love him. He was consistent right across every quarter. He scored well in every quarter, 12.8. Right down the bottom, there were a couple of concerning games, and we'll talk about one of them. Jacob Van Ruin, he looked out of sorts, didn't he? He looked a bit like where he's mistiming his jumps, and he had -3 points. And you wonder how that can be for a forward to have -3, missing dead easy goals, missing dead easy marks, turning the ball over. That's how you get it. Even worse than that was Brody Mychek. He was -5 points, meaning that is really poor. And he had a shocker right from the get-go. It was good that he kicked the goal, but he was lucky he kicked that goal. Thought he was missing
almost
it.
Missed it, yeah. But it's a good thing that we did what we did, and our 2 key forwards had those results.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a really good point. I think that's an excellent point. What I just wanted to highlight really about the top 5 players is I love that Koz, and I'll talk about more later, but that he was our best player because it said to me that the respect for Maxi Gawn and what's his name? King said in an interview I heard on SEN that he did talk to the team at 3/4 time about the importance of standing up for Gorney and TMax. And that's how they played. And I love the fact that Fritter was up in the top 5, and Jake Lever and Chandler and Sparrow, Jack Steele, they're our leaders, and they were our best players. So, massive credit to those fellas. We'll move on to the next one. And Andy, if you could play the next clip for me, that'd be great.
For me, the game will come down to how well we negate or mitigate their advantage that they'll have at stoppages, and in terms of how they win the footy. So how well we can negate that, and how well we can exploit our advantage in terms of how we move the ball, how we transition the ball, and how we use the ball. So for me, critical will be our capacity to score from turnover. The 70% of score now is from turnover. We won it. We won against the Saints. You could argue because the biggest symptom of that was that we had 20 odd more points than them on turnover. It was conversely the opposite was true in this game. So for me, the critical thing is how well we transition the ball, how well we run and spread to cover their transition, negate their ball winning ability, negate their stoppage, scores from stoppage, move the ball quickly from the back half, look to be aggressive. I'm really confident about this game. We're actually going into this game remarkably as favourites. Well, I don't think it's remarkable, but it probably says something about where the Blues are at, but we're favourites to win this game. The weather's going to be good, a perfect day for footy. I've got a feeling they might have set themselves for this game. We've got an 8-day break into it. I could really see us running them, and I think we'll look to do that. I think we'll look to run them into the ground and really look to exploit their lack of leg speed. I'm super confident for this game, and I'm thinking a 4-goal+ win. We'll see how it pans out.
Thanks for that, Andy. Now, that was from the end of the stats podcast from last week. Now, I only partly play that to pump up my own tires. It's not really my style. But more for a couple of reasons is because that's why I wanted to highlight, really, that's why I like sort of the combination of watching games and using data and stats to help me understand it. Because for me, and I said this on the podcast last week, this game would come down to what I said on that audio clip about our ability to, mitigate their strengths in ball winning and maximise our strengths in ball use and transition and how we move the ball. And that's why we won the game. So I think the two biggest factor was that's exactly what happened. Our ball winning, so the ball winning the way to the equity points. So as I talked about last week, is the player rating points are made up of all sorts of categories of points, but the two biggest ways players can accrue points is winning the footy, so points from winning possession of the ball and how they use the ball, so points from disposal, including their shots at goal and what they do with it. And for ball use, you get points for actions that move the ball into a better scoring position or result in a goal. You lose points for turnovers, missed shots, backwards move that Carlton kept on doing that decreases the team's immediate scoring probability. And for ball winning equity, you get points added to a team's expected score specifically from the act of winning a possession in dispute. Now, their ball winning is their strength. Their contested ball is their strength. Their clearances is their strength, as I said there. And as I noted then, is that how we went in mitigating their ball winning ability and maximise our strength, which is the ball use, would tell a tale. And I think that's exactly what happened. So ball winning points, so these are all of the points accrued by each individual player aggregated up into a score, to the total score. We had 110.7 points across our team for points for ball winning. They had 111.3. So bang on. So a bit of context, the AFL average for ball winning is 110.9. So we were just a tick below, marginally below the AFL average. We're averaging 112 so far in ball winning. It won't surprise anyone with the players that we had at our disposal last year with Claz and Track. Our average last year was 112.5 points for ball winning. So we're not going to be that ball winning team that we were last year, but we matched the Blues in that. That's a pretty remarkable number because they smashed us off the park in the first quarter for contested possessions and ball winning, and a number of other stats, the territory as well. For all of the stats, you can listen to the Stats File podcast tomorrow, or Wednesday, I should say. But critically, and this is what won us the game, I think, our ball use. So this is all of the points each player accrues for using the football, aggregated up into a total score. Across the team, we scored 67.5 points for how we used the ball. They only scored 41. We were plus 26.6. And for me, that's really the game. Again, by way of contrast, AFL average is 49.9 points for ball use. And so if you think of ball use, it's not just how well you kick the ball. It's the most important part of it is how impactful you are. How much does it help your team score with the way you use the ball? So we got 67.5 points for that. AFL average is 49.9. And again, by contrast, last year we were 39.6, almost half our ball use that we scored in this match was our AFL average last year. Our average last year, which doesn't surprise me at all. Our average so far in our 3 games is 58.7. So it was better than our average across the 3 games. That's exactly where we won. And I just wanted to highlight a couple of players in there. This is Kozzy, his genius of Kozzy. His ball winning was 10.9 points. Of his 23.2 points, he got 10.9 of them from winning the ball, and he got 11, though, for ball use. So that combination of a ballistic player who can use a footy is unbelievable. By way of contrast, Maxi got 10 points for winning the ball, but only 2.1 for how he used it in terms of impact. Bailey Fritsch, on the other hand, 3.2 for winning the ball, but 13 points from how he used it, mainly kicking goals. But he also hit up a couple of beautiful targets as well. And Jake Lever, 9.1 for winning the ball and 5.3 for ball use. Very impressive. The other thing for me that was the big factor in our win, and I mentioned this, I can't remember if I mentioned it on this pod last week, but I certainly mentioned it on the Stats File pod, is for all the talk about the game being quicker and all of that stuff, pressure is still king in big games and will remain so. And that was proved to be the case in a number of games over the weekend. I think the Doggies game, pressure was off the charts. The Geelong Cats game too, but that was wet, so it's a bit different. But in this game, our team pressure was off the charts, including in the first quarter, which was really interesting. Our pressure was fine in the first quarter. They didn't blow us away because of our pressure and we weren't ready. They blew us away because of our appalling execution of our skills. It was 185. We were plus 16 in that first quarter, though, 169, 183 pressure points. Remember, 200 is considered elite. 180 is the AFL benchmark for good pressure. 183 to 177 in the second. This is where the things went really off the charts. Third quarter, at the end of the third quarter, 209 to 187 plus 22 pressure points in that quarter. And we ran the game out and they didn't. Their lowest, or the second lowest, was 171 in the last. We had 202 pressure points in the last, plus 31. They only had 171. We were plus 19 for the match, 195 to 176. Again, 200's elite. That is enormous. Halfway through that third quarter, our pressure rating was 238 points, which is really, really off the charts. We won that game through pressure. And again, just touching on King's comments at this function that I spoke to, he talked about what he believes in footy. And he said, we're a territory team. We're not going to dink it around the back half. And so what Carlton did, actually, we're going to go forward. We're going to be a low disposal team, high impact team. Get it forward. If it means kicking long, then so be it. Of course, hit up that target if they're free, but in most cases, they're not going to be free. Kick it long. And intensity. He kept on talking about intensity. And he talked about against Freo, the problem was our lack of intensity, our lack of pressure. So fantastic performance from that perspective of the players bringing the heat. And the key players for pressure were Jack Steele, amazing, 32 individual pressure acts. The next one, Cade Chandler, was second. He had 24. So Jack Steele had 8 more pressure acts than Cade Chandler, who had second. He had 96 pressure points. Like, that's unheard of. Jack Steele had 96 pressure points. His season average is 61.7. That is just off the charts. Cade Chandler had 63 pressure points. Tommy Sparrow, what a great game. He had 59 pressure points. Kozzy had 50 pressure points. Harry Sharp, another great game, 50 pressure points. Caleb Windsor, very impressive game. I thought 40 pressure points. He was really critical in that third quarter. He had something like 450 metres gained in that third quarter. And rounding out the top 6, Christian Salem had 34 pressure points, 16 individual pressure acts. So, he got criticised a fair bit, Salo, but, he brought a lot of pressure to the table. So, I think they were the big factors in our win, was how well we used the ball, how well we negated their ball winning ability, their contest. And I'd go so far as saying in the last 3 quarters, we outplayed them in that space, in the ball winning space. So terrific performance from those factors. And I think they were the key factors in the win. But of course, I'll unpack it in much more detail on the Stats File pod.
All right, look forward to that dropping sometime tomorrow. Let's get into our listener questions, and we start with our slow starts and the first quarter issues. Gorn of the Dead writes, how does King fix stability, having his players being able to stay close to teams in the first quarter? There are certainly glimpses of great gameplay from round 1 and round 3. How can King have this be more consistent? Mandalorian asks, is anyone else concerned by our slow starts? It nearly cost us badly today when we fell 43 points behind. Full credit to the players and coaches for the way they turned it around, and our fitness clearly plays a big role in those strong finishes. But those sluggish openings still need to be addressed. By all means, let's celebrate a terrific come-from-behind win, but I really hope we can fix the slow starts and build towards playing 4 quarters of footy. Spirit of Norm Smith adds, the third game in a row that the opposition have jumped the D's. Slow starts are a problem. How do we get the team pressure and creative run going right from the start? Tolstoy's Nudge says, I felt like the slow start was related to our travel to Perth last week versus their 17-day break. We settle later in the game, got ball outside the contest and won by 23. Are we satisfied? Are we ready to stop throwing in the towel after a bad quarter, which will happen all year and next year? It's just part of the process. It's how we respond that matters. We had no right running down a team that's had a 17-day break. None. We had a Perth trip and a tough loss, yet managed our fifth best comeback of the modern time against a side whose backs were up against the wall, and that made them look second rate. We not only ran them down, but we smashed them to win by 4 goals. So, George, the slow starts is starting to become a pattern. It's happened 3 weeks in a row. We've now seen it that 3 weeks in a row. While the response has been great, you can't keep giving sides big leads and expect to get away with it. How do you see it? Is this something Stephen King can fix quickly, or is it just part of the growing pains with a young team learning a new system?
I think it's less of a pattern after only 3 rounds into the season than the pattern that Carlton have got the way they're playing. The 3 games have been very different, and in this game, to use, if you recall, Bidman's little clip from Stephen King from his post-game interview, very first line, execute the basic fundamentals was the problem in the first quarter. We were shocking, absolutely shocking. Dropped marks, handballs that missed players. We were still doing all the right things, but there was the actual execution that was killing us in this game. We changed, like I said, we changed the ruck setup to get the ball more on the outside. Carlton scored 4 goals from boundary throw-ins in the first quarter. So that indicated the change in the way that we were able to deny them getting their hands on the ball. So we would have actually scored a couple of goals if in that first quarter alone, if people had been able to take easy chest marks. For example, there are a couple of those. They would have been certain goals, and it wouldn't have been considered a first quarter failure if the score at the end was 4 goals to 2. But in this case, we did everything wrong in that first quarter. They did everything right. And when we changed strategically what we were doing, or tactically rather, what we're doing on the ground, you saw the results in this game. Our fitness is certainly at a very high level. The fact that we've been able to run out these games. Perth, I think you've got to realise that Freo are a top 4 side playing on a hot day over there. It's not surprising the result that we got. But overall, I wouldn't be worried about 3 rounds into the seasons. Saying we've got a slow start. It was just individual circumstances on the day. Stephen, as you know, was asked, is this something King can fix quickly? Well, he did. He fixed it in the first quarter in this game, and we saw the results of that. So all credit to the coaching staff for what they did in this game. All credit to the players to be able to execute it ultimately with the end result we got.
Yeah, I agree with all of that, George. And I'd add that I heard Stephen King, as I said before, interviewed on SEN. He's quite interesting. He's really quite open and in terms of talking about the game. And he sort of, just picking up what you were saying, he made a distinction between the Freo game and this game. He said that the intensity wasn't at the right level in the Freo game. That was the most disappointing thing. They weren't sort of ready to play. He felt they were in this game, and I think I was really surprised, to be honest, when I saw the pressure ratings that it was so high. So he felt that the intensity level and the focus was where it needed to be, but we just were woeful. We just didn't execute to the way we, to the level that we needed to, and a better team would have killed us. Like I was thinking, we were lucky that 4 goals. I was thinking, can we hang on for those last 90 seconds and reset at quarter time when we were in this? And they kicked those last 2 goals, which are so frustrating. Coaches must hate that. But I think your point's a really good one too, George, that there was a couple of chances early on to kick goals that if we'd taken them and it had only been 3 goals, we probably wouldn't be talking about this. The other thing that occurred to me is I wonder whether the game plan, where it requires that overlapping, they really smashed us in that first quarter for stoppages, for clearances, but most of all, they crushed us for time in forward half. So I think it was something like 60-40 or something like that in that first quarter, which means that we were trying to initiate our transition from deep in our defence. And just sort of logically, you'd think that makes it more difficult because you're having to get through more players. And with our kicking skills as poor as they were, and our missed tackles and our fumbles, they probably could have hurt us even more, but we just couldn't. I think it's probably harder to move it from deep with our overlap handball because it's just harder to get going. So I reckon that's a factor. But as Tolstoy's nudged, once their fatigue kicked in a little bit, the ground opened up a little bit, and then we're able to sort of move it more fluidly. But I agree. 3 weeks in is too small. To be honest, I'd rather start slow than finish poorly like we did in 24 and 25, because I suspect the issue in 24 and 25 was our fitness and running power. And you can't do much about that. You can fix fast starts, but you can't fix lack of leg speed.
Well, the next one, speaking about fitness, Rue asks, is the reason we are running our game so well due to our fitness? And from X.com, Demon Faithful asks, how much of a strong finish, how much of our strong finishes are down to fitness? We seem to be running over teams late. Is that a clear edge we've got right now? And Lazy writes, super comeback, so proud of the guys to give Max and Tom a 250th to remember. What is the story behind the comeback, though, because it happened so quickly? I think our ground ball game raised to a new level in the second half, but they also persisted with the plan of moving it fast and taking risks. Continuing to move it fast was always going to give a side like Carlton trouble, and when we started winning the clearances, then it was really in play. Carlton pulled the shutters down with 10 minutes left, and that seemed to build even more belief. Thoughts? And Lakeside Oval says, I was watching the game from the Galapagos, and reception was patchy. It seemed to me the players were moving around quite a bit from their usual positions, and I wonder whether you could dissect the moves that were made that assisted in getting on top in the second half. I just have a feeling that Stephen King and the team are refreshingly a bit more open to throwing the magnets around than Goody was. So, big man, there's a lot of discussion in around how we're finishing games so strongly, and we've alluded to that, and whether it's purely fitness or something more, but also what actually flipped the switch in the second half. So, from your perspective, was that comeback driven by superior fitness, or were there clear changes in our ball movement, clearance work, positional changes, and our overall style that allowed us to take control? And you've mentioned, a bit of the rucks we changed a bit, and so anything else that you see on the day?
Working around the first bit around our fitness, I think we are fit. And I really like it when you hear players repeating the sort of like a mantra, or multiple players saying the same thing, and the coach. Fitness has clearly been a major sort of focus for the club. And on that front, credit where it's due to Selwyn Griffith and the high performance team. Not only has he got the team humming in terms of fitness, we haven't had major touchwood alert, any of the soft tissue injuries that seems to be bloody like across the competition. There are just so many soft tissue injuries. I guess we had one on the weekend now with CJ, but apart from that, we've been really, we've had a great run right through his while he's been in charge of the high performance. We've had a great run with soft tissue injuries. We are definitely fit, but I was also thinking this in relation to the Blues. I don't think they're fit enough, but it's probably not as simple as just being fit enough. It's also your athletic profile. In fact, your nephew, I was speaking to Andy, and he noted that, and I forget the time now, that the time that for the 2 kilometre time trial that Harry Sharp runs is up around sort of Commonwealth Games level sort of time for that distance. Phenomenal. Was in the 5 minutes, something or other. And, I think he said Harry Sheasel's 6 minutes or something like so. Super, super quick. And my point really is that there's fit and there's also athletic profile. So I think we're super fit, but King is clearly, the game is based around running. I've talked about this already a number of times, and it is all about running. And it's a running power. You'll hear now, I've heard multiple different commentators, particularly ex-players or recently retired ex-players, talking about running power, which is a shorthand for ability to cover the ground quickly. The game style that we're going to be playing this season demands that. And so therefore it demands a whole lot of players like Harry Sharp, who I don't think it's any surprise. He could get a game last season, and now has been in our top 5 or 6 players every single week, is running phenomenal distance. Chandler, if you think of Langdon, Chandler, that's why I think they brought Paddy Cross in to bring in more run. They got rid of 2 slope players in Track and Clary and brought in quick players. It is, when we went to that player sponsor function, Andy, Colt, Lever were both talking about how much running that they're doing, how much extra running they've been doing this season. So I think that's, in order to do that, you need to be fit. You also need to be a good athlete. And so I think of someone like Paddy Cripps, who's probably no doubt fit, like he's probably fit and strong, but he's not a running machine, and so it doesn't really matter how fit he is. He's not going to cover the ground the way, say, Harry Sharp is. And that's the way the game's going. And I think that was not enough's been made of that. I think that's really the reason why Carlton lost, is the fit. In terms of the game, moving towards us, I think, though, that with that running power, particularly against a side like Carlton that isn't athletically that strong, as the game progresses and fatigue starts kicking into the opposition, it plays into our game style, which is exactly my point that I was trying to make with the stats, with the ball use, and transition and scoring from turnover. We outscored them from memory. I think we scored 50 points on turnover, I think. We really, more than them. And that was the biggest factor, is that sort of as the game goes on, particularly against a team who isn't, that, they're a ball-winning team, not a ball-using team, our comparative advantage over them just got greater and greater as the game went on. But really the sort of other factor in the win was that from the second quarter on, we just absolutely dominated territory. It was 40-60 in the first quarter. It ended up being, I forget, like 55-45. We dominated it. And we also not only matched them at the contest, as demonstrated with the ball use stuff, we beat them, we almost matched them in clearances. We were down in post clearance possessions, contested possessions, yet we got more impact from them. So we had more points from our ball equity from post clearance, despite the fact that they actually won more raw numbers from post clearance. The other factor I think was Maxie's rucking. Like, he had, I think, 42 more hit outs than the opposition. So it allowed us to get territory. We got it forward, and all of the data, all of the numbers, we just smashed them from the second quarter on. So I don't think anything was majorly sort of done in the box. I think we started executing a bit better. It has to be said, though, we probably don't win that game without the performance of Koz, or we almost certainly don't win that game without the performance of Kozzy and Max. So, that's probably as big a factor as anything. I just think we got the game on our terms. We got it how we wanted to, and we were able to run them down because I think we're a better team than them, and we're playing a form of footy that's hard to defend against, and is more in line with, how the best teams are playing at the moment. So I don't think anything radical was done. It was interesting. Colt began sort of half tagging Cripps, but they abandoned that. Partly CJ went off, and I thought Colt was pretty good behind the ball. That was one magnet change. But there weren't too many other magnet change. I was really impressed by Sparrow. I thought he was a big factor in the win. So in terms of, I think, in terms of your question, definitely the comeback was driven by superior fitness, but we just got the game on our terms, and we started playing it how we want to. And to be honest, they didn't really have a response. They made a weird thing. They went into their shells halfway through the quarter, and, how often did we see that in 24, 25 and think, what are you doing? Now, kick a goal is the best form of defence, isn't it? And when they started doing that, I thought, right, we're in this game. We're going to win it. So, yeah, terrific performance. But, yeah, we're definitely fit.
The other minor point to note out of this game along the fitness lines is we kicked 88 points in half a game of football.
Yep, that's
which was the second half.
14 goals in the second half. In second half, was it? Or
that's 21 grand final numbers.
Yeah, just absolutely incredible. If we do that in coming up games, there'll be a few more wins than what we expected.
Lefty writes, how bloody good is our captain Max Gawn? 17 years, 250 games, 116 goals, 8,349 hitouts, 8 All-Australians and a premiership as captain. He's still carving teams up at 34, and I'm positive he will still end up in the 300 club. El Diablo 14 asks, Max Gawn, do you have any more superlatives to describe him? So George, Max Gawn, what a player, what a man. What a performance in his 250th, 23 disposals, 6 clearances, 58 hitouts, 17 to advantage, 5 score involvements, 5 inside 50s, 362 metres gained.
Yes, what a performance from Max. Out of all Binman statistics, there was one statistic that really, really stood out where, kicks and marks and clearances and all that for the game were pretty well aligned with both sides. There was 58 hitouts to 26, most of which for Max. Absolutely dominated, not just in centre bounce, but around the ground as well. And as a result of that, he was the one who brought people like Kozzy and Sparrow and Chandler into the game because of what he was doing in and around the ground. That slight change that they made in that first quarter or at the end of the first quarter ultimately won us the game. But the Binman wasn't at the game. But in that last quarter, when it was probably something like 6 minutes to go, the ball went down the members' wing, and Max took a big contested mark, which absolutely denied any chance that Carlton were going to get it back into their forward line. Everybody knew the game was over at that particular point, and it was probably one of the major reasons why all the fans who had just done that in front of all the Carlton fans were going to leave the ground, because there was no way that that match was going to be lost from that point on. Max had decided. So, great game from Max. Certainly one of the best performances we've seen, certainly up with that performance down at Geelong to get us into the in the finals in 2021, where he absolutely took the game on single-handedly. Well, he did exactly the same in this game. Oh, one more thing.
Totally.
One more thing about the ruck change, the techniques. I remember on the replay that I watched, one of the commentators noticed that Cripps had 3 disposals in the third quarter. Absolutely took him. So, that change absolutely took everything away from Carlton. It was just remarkable.
It was a fantastic performance, wasn't it? And exactly as you said, but just some curious numbers on those hitouts and ruck contests. In this game, though, this really surprised me. There were we had 113 ruck contests. AFL average this year is 87.8. Like that's unbelievable. And 68 hitouts to 26, as you said, George. AFL average for us, AFL average this season is 34.6 hitouts. So almost twice as many hitouts we got as AFL average. And we're averaging 48.7 this season. So just amazing performance. Hitouts to advantage of those 60, 18, and I know Maxie hates this stat, but hitouts to, well, he dislikes the raw hitouts number 2, but hitouts to advantage he dislikes because I've heard him say that, it's not always up to him if they go to advantage. The mid's got to do their job. He had 18 hitouts to advantage. They had 10. Now, that doesn't sound like much, but that's huge. And AFL average, I was really surprised, is like 10.2 hitouts to advantage. So almost twice as many hitouts to advantage as AFL average. It's a huge performance. And I think you make a really good point, George, about his cleverness. The other thing I'd add is I don't know about maybe I couldn't see it properly on the telly, but he seemed to get scragged at every single contest. They seemed to be pulling his jumper, and it looked a bit like Pitternet was almost tagging him. And but and Maxi was getting angry about it as well. And again, we talked about this a couple of years ago, but the umpires need to look after Maxi and pay free kicks that are there. If they're there, pay him.
Yeah, I think he only got one of those holding, scragging frees. Smurf says, how awesome was Kozzy's second half? Up to half-time, he was having a mare. He had 14 disposals with only 3 effective ones and a disposal efficiency of 21%. After half-time, he had 19 disposals, bringing his total to 33, which is the first time he's had over 30 disposals in his career. His previous best was 26 last year against the Eagles. He was one of our leaders that really stepped up and led from the front. Bloody love Kozzy. So, man, he just keeps taking that game to another level. Anything more you want to say about Kozzy? You're on mute.
Sorry about that. Just trying to find. Just the main thing, like as you said, highest rated second half in the last 5 years was Clayton Oliver, 29.5 rating points against Adelaide in 21.
Yeah.
So halfway, yeah. Tex Walker in 23, 25.9, Rowell 24.7, and Kozzy in this game. Just terrific. His second half was unbelievable. Some of his numbers were, you go through all of the numbers and see how dominant he was. But as I said, like one of the things that really stood out when you look at ball winning and ball equity is his points for ball winning. He got 10 of his 23.2 points, 10.9 for winning the footy, and 11 for ball use. There'd barely be a player in the AFL, maybe Track when he's up and about if he's really kicking well, maybe Bont, who would be able to have those sorts of split in their points across ball winning and ball use. That hit that he put on on Williams was actually a really critical turning point because he's one of their few runners, and not that he's that quick. They're really dead slow. That's a major issue for him. But it took him out of the game. He didn't come back after that. And it reminded me so much of Byron Pickett, the way Byron Pickett used to tuck up and look for that contact. And I think that's the dynamic thing about him is he can do special things. He can do things that X factor, like a lot of small forwards. Yet he can also be so physical and so aggressive. And not only did he break Williams' rib with that perfectly timed thing, it showed the genius. He could see him coming, and he elected to tap the ball over rather than collect it. Set up what could have been a goal for Fritter. He just missed, but really sort of tucked his shoulder in and got him clean into the ribs, and then gave him a mouthful afterwards, which I just was so impressed. And similarly, when he ran down or he tackled Walsh, gave him a mouthful afterwards, and just fantastic performance. Leaving all of the data aside and the numbers and all of that stuff. What I really, really loved about this performance was, one, he did it for Maxi, but two, this is what we have been crying out for a long time, which I feel like we didn't have last year. A player, and that's what, I'm not going to bag Track, but for Melbourne, he didn't do what he needed, I think, to do for us last year, which is win a game off his own boot. Go out there and just go, I am going to make sure my team doesn't lose this game today. That to me, it changed my perception a little bit of Kozzy in a way. It was like, that's what a leader does. And I thought after the game, you know what, I could see Kozzy becoming captain of Melbourne Footy Club, because that's what captains do. Captains say, I'm not going to lose this game. I'm going to do whatever it takes. And so not only has he got all the skills, he's got all the X factor. For me, that showed rare leadership qualities, the ability to go out and go, well, you know what, I'm going to do it for Max and for the team. I'm going to play physical. I'm going to use all my skills. And, speaking of skills, that goal he kicked, the last goal he kicked off one step just on 50. I mean, like, how many footballers could do that? That was like a sort of exclamation mark on the game and his performance. For me, that is, I'm struggling to think. Maybe that Clayton game, actually, he was phenomenal in that game now that I think about it, that Adelaide game. But I cannot think of all the time I've followed, watched footy. I can't recall many better second halves of footy. It was amazing. And it was, given the circumstances, given Maxi and TMax 250th, I could not be more impressed with him. And I'd love to meet him and to express that, because I just was blown away by his attitude and his performance.
What really stood out for me, you've just gone through all the superlatives, but when we had 1-2 on the scoreboard at half-time coming into the third quarter, it was Kozzy who brought the other players into the game. Or apart from his, fantastic individual efforts, which were just, breathtaking to watch, he was the one who was able to bring Fritsch, for example, into the game to have the effect that he required. All of a sudden, Sparrow stood up. All of a sudden, Chandler stood up. It was just amazing, because people could see that, hey, Kozzy's doing something very special in this game. I could too. And it really was quite infectious throughout the whole side. The other thing I think we should remember when we first started talking about Kozzy was the comparisons with Cyril Rioli. How do you think they stand now?
Well, he was tracking at that time we were talking about it. He was tracking to be better at the time to Cyril. I haven't done any of the stats to compare what he is now with where Cyril was at the same time, and perhaps that's something to look at for next week. Well, yeah. I'm not here, but I can no. I'll still be helping out B-Man with the stats files, intros and outros. So if I remember it, I'll look up those stats and produce that, because that's interesting. Pingu, right?
Just one more thing. Sorry, Andy. Yep. Just to want to reinforce that point, I think so important, George, is not only did others stand up when they saw him standing up, he brought an energy that the whole team fed off. Like it was different. You could just see it. Thought, like, from the speech, or from the King thing that I saw at this function, he said the sort of theme for the team is ruthless, selfless, connected. That's the mantra for the team, and that's what Kozzy played like. He was ruthless, he was selfless, and he was connected to the team. And he felt to me like that's what to me is leadership. He said, "Come with me, boys. I'm gonna take us to the next level." And just quickly, the other thing that was interesting was in terms of that game plan, just picking up that game plan discussion, and also with Kozzy, is King talked about in this thing that the philosophy is rip and squeeze as an 18-man unit, is the language he used. He said rip and squeeze as an 18-man unit. When asked to explain what that meant, he talked about that, for years people talk about all-team defense. He believes in all-team offense and all-team defense as well, but all-team offense when the whole team move as a movement, as a group. And that sort of question, that was part of the question was, what positions are people playing in? They move as one unit, and I think there's under his model, there's less and less sort of clear positions. So players like Langdon is a classic example. He's not really playing a role in the traditional sense of how you would think a halfback flank or a half forward. He's just playing with that unit who's moving as one to where the football is, up and down the ground.
It's not just him. It's not just him either.
Yeah, exactly. It's not just him. It's Chandler and Cully, and you go, where are they playing? Yeah. And that really Sharp, that description of. Yeah, exactly. He talked it almost like an amoeba moving up and down the ground, but it also said that's why so much running is required. And just on that, he was asked, what's his name, Paul Guerra was there, and he was interviewing him, and Paul Guerra said, he relayed this story that he was asked about to rate the team. He said, well, as part of the interview process, King was asked, well, where do you see our list at? Give us a sense of, where do you think we're at in terms of, is it a rebuild? Where are we going? And King, apparently the answer was, I can't tell you until you give me the GPS numbers. When I see the GPS numbers, I'll tell you where our list is at. And to me, that spoke volumes about his philosophy and the importance of running power. And he went through them. How quick are they over 100 metres? What's their striding pace? What's their aerobic capacity? And it spoke to me really sort of a sense of, well, this is what his game plan is going to be all about, running.
It's also good to hear that a coach sort of can digest those numbers and those stats and those data sets and make something out of it and make an adjudication of where the list is at. It elevates him in my eyes as well, just that he is across all that and, can use it to his advantage. Well, let's move on. Pingu writes, I thought Sparrow produced one of his best performances in the second half. He really stood up around the contest, worked hard through the middle and was able to push forward and hit the scoreboard. Last week, I asked whether we might be expecting too much from our young brigade. I thought they responded strongly in the second half. Most of them had first halves they would want to forget, but the same could be said for plenty of D's players. There were fumbles and missed disposals everywhere early, yet Langford, Lindsay, Windsor and Colt all lifted after the break and helped bring Kingy's game style to life as the D's overran the Blues. And Despicable Me says, I would also like to sing the praises of Sparrow with respect to stepping up through opportunity. I was excited this year to see who was going to fill the supposed gaping hole in our midfield left by the departures and injury to our magnificent grand final midfield. I would like to suggest that if Petrarca was still with us and he had a hamstring injury, we may well have lost this encounter because no one would have stepped up. Last week and for the first half this week, we were smashed at clearances and stoppages and all the media was suggesting our midfield will condemn us to the bottom regions of the ladder. But in the second half, I think we really saw the emergence of a midfield that is learning to compete, where players might have been challenged by King and finally responded. It was terrific to see, and Sparrow was a real standout in this area. I am confident of continued growth. So, George, how significant was the lift from Sparrow and his contribution in the second half? And also, last week there was some questions around some of our younger kids who all lifted and played their roles in the comeback.
This was probably one of Tom's better games. I really think that he lifted because of Max and because of Pickett. They gave him the opportunities. Also because we were denying the Carlton midfield the ability to get their hands on the ball first, except for that first quarter, with the change in the rucking that we've talked about. That brought our players like Sparrow, like Chandler, like Kozzy into the game more, and they responded. When you're getting the ball in your hands, it's great. It was so much more open, and as Bin Man said, because we're hitting it out, they were able to actually pick the ball up on the run, which looks even more fantastic from rather than just grunt and grind, which we've become used to over the years. So we've got a group of players. Windsor's another one who fully benefited from the change in the midfield. Again, he's an outside type of player, so. Looks spectacular. Meters gained because you get the ball into his hands on the outside really becomes devastating. So it was good in this game to be able to see the positives coming out of what was being done. But I think it was really Max and Kozzy that lit the fire under these guys and provided them with the opportunity. So hopefully they've learned that you don't need to have someone do that to you. You've got the ability, so get out there and do it again.
Anything else, Ben? Or I'll move on.
I don't know. Just to reinforce that I think it was his best game for the Melbourne Footy Club. And he had, what do you have? He had 427 metres gained, 71% time on ground. His numbers were almost on par with Patrick Cripps. Patrick Cripps was 6.3 for winning the ball. Tommy Sparrow was 6.8. Patrick Cripps only had 183 metres gained. Tommy Sparrow had 427, and a big part of that was the connection with Maxi. But we really needed a physical player, especially in the absence of Jack Viney at the moment. And Tom Sparrow was that player on Sunday. I think it was his best game for the Melbourne Footy Club. I was so thrilled for him. He's a real stalwart, a great leader. His pressure was off the charts. He had, interestingly, had 11 handball receives. So it was a big, Sam Walsh had 20, for instance, but not many players had any more than, no Melbourne players had more than that. So they were using him a lot as that link-up player and getting it forward, which probably helps explain his metres gained a bit. But, best performance I've seen him play, and, he stood up for his captain.
Yeah, D's fans have been sort of wanting him to take that next step. So I'd love to see that on a more consistent basis, because I think we've seen glimpses of it here or there. So we know he has the ability. Let's just see that more often. And this was a fantastic game. Scroll says, I'm a little bit concerned about the form of JVR in the last 2 weeks. He was superb in round one, kicking a career-high 6 goals. But since then, he's not kicked a goal. Do you think that him having to do the relief ruck work has been a factor here? So, Big Man, any concerns over JVR's form the past 2 weeks after that incredible career best game in round one? And is there any correlation in his form in these past 2 weeks and his role as the relief ruck, which he didn't need to do in that first match? It wasn't required of him because of personnel at the time, yeah.
We're looking back. I actually think that he was put into the ruck to get him into the game. That would be my guess, because he did his best work in this game was when he was as the relief ruck. No, not major concerns. No, well, not really concerns at all. However, he wasn't sort of super influential. Big difference between this game and the Saints game was we were playing very much a forward half game of footy in the last 3 quarters. The ball wasn't up, we didn't have much space to run into because we were pressed up so much. So that model that I'm talking about, that King talked about at this function I went to, is the back, when the ball's in their back half, our forward push right up and squeeze. And when it's conversely, when the ball's in our forward half, the defence line pushes right back up. So it's when you have the ball in the forward line as often as we did for that last 3 quarters, there's not going to be much space in the forward line. We were kicking long because there wasn't. And I think that what he didn't have that space to run into that he did in the Saints game, because the game was stretched more in that Saints game. There was more space, and when we're getting those overlap handball chains going, we're often meaning that we're getting into a forward line with lots of space to lead into, giving him one-on-one chances. He didn't get many one-on-one chances in this game, so not major concerns. I think it's pretty tough going for the key forwards in modern footy. You look at the Harry Mackays, not that many key forwards are dominating.
When Mackay gets 1 goal and Myercheck gets 1 goal, McGovern got 3, I think, but the rest of it is these days is spread amongst all either the mids or the small forwards or anybody else who happens to be in the area.
Yeah, and as we've talked about over the last few years, George, we need more goals out of our midfielders, our Windsors and our Rivers and our Cullys, and because that's really the difference between Brisbane and the rest, I reckon, is they get so many goals from those medium-sized players.
Ilbato asks, where does Salo sit for the rest of the year? He looked good against the Saints, but really lacked any sort of intensity today, and last week was a write-off for everyone. I've never seen him beaten so easily in a one-on-one marking contest as he was today against a first gamer. So, George, any concerns from you in regards to Salem?
Yeah, Salo's problem is problem we've got with a few of them that we're starting to see is just getting that little bit old. And when you, as you know, in this game, the really telling one was when Byrne outmarked him.
Yeah,
first game player, 18 years of age, who probably was 5 centimetres shorter than him as well, and he was outmarked. That would have never happened to Salo in the past. He's still got absolutely sublime kicking skills, but the way the speed of the game is picking up and up, he's still a very, very valuable member of our backline. But once you hit 30, there's very few players get better after that age. Unfortunately, we don't have many other options sitting at Casey to replace people like that. That'll happen over the next couple of years, hopefully. So he's around. He's still doing quite well, but those are the cracks that you start to see in players like that once they hit that age.
Master Chief says, Lever turned back the clock today. I thought that he was excellent and almost back to some of his best footy. Let's hope this form continues. So big man Lever has been a focus of a bit of criticism, and some of it's unfair in my humble opinion, given, we've had a decline of our once much vaunted defence, and there are a number of factors that have contributed to that. But did we see a glimpse of the old Jake Lever on Saturday taking those marks? I think he took 11 intercepts. So it was fantastic to see.
He was awesome. And in fact, it's funny you should say the old Jake Lever. The thing that impressed me the most in this game is he looks like he's got a bit more athletic. So maybe he's had a good run at a
full preseason, yeah.
And you just cannot underestimate the importance of a proper preseason. So he looks in good nick. And just on that point about the old Jake Lever, what I really liked in this game is he was not hanging onto the ball after a mark. He was looking to move it straight away in a way that was really, really noticeable. And he was a good example of what I was talking about, King's thing of the defenders pushing up. He was really, and so did Xavier Lindsay did this a lot, really pushing up the ground. And the way King was talking about it, this function was saying he wants his defenders to be part of scoring. He wants them to be, looking for opportunities to be participants in scoring. And I thought his attitude was the thing that stood out for me. Really prepared to go quick, really prepared to take on some kicks. His kicking was actually really good. I thought disposal efficiency at 90.5 and as I said, 16.6. I'd have to check, but I'd be guessing that player rating is probably his best for couple of seasons, I'd be guessing. Ball winning was 9.1 points of that, and his ball use 5.3. That's pretty solid performance. What was really stood out in terms of where he got his points, his post-clearance stuff was 15.7 points as he got post the ball. So he also had 403 metres gained and a couple of inside 50s, which speaks to that sort of point about those defenders being involved in scoring and really being sort of not just defenders, but also part of the attacking stuff. So impressive performance, I thought. A couple of score involvements as well, 2 tackles, 6 pressure acts. Great game from him, but the thing that stood out for me was that he wasn't holding onto the ball and that he looked like he's really making an effort to make sure that he plays the way King wants his team to play.
The other factor I think you need to bring into consideration is the presence of TMax. That enables players like Lever to be able to play the way they want to. I think we saw in the previous game when Lever's put on tall backs, tall forwards, he really struggles. But in this game, with TMax there, who takes Mackay out of the game effectively, only kick 1 goal, 1 or something. Lever's able to do what he wants, but also I think Blake Howes played one of his better games as well in the back line. Yeah. Again, TMax brought the structure that we've become familiar with, in the best of the May years, where you've got a general in the back line who takes the serious guerrillas and lets the rest of the back line do what they're meant to do. And we saw great examples of this in this game.
Speaking of tackles that you mentioned before, from Facebook, Ruby Q says, how lucky were we to get Jack Steele for a steal? What a tackling machine. He was immense in the second half when he went on Cripper. Some of those 16 tackles were bone-crunching. Saints fans must be filthy to have given up a player and a person of this calibre. Tolstoy's Nudge says, how good is Jack Steele? My goodness, what a lamb special. So George, just how impactful was Steele's performance in this game, and just how lucky are we that St Kilda didn't rate him as a player or a leader to keep him at their club.
Yeah, I think just one stat alone was 16 tackles, I think, in this game. Just incredible. That's one of the reasons that you stop, particularly in that first quarter, you limit the effectiveness of people like Cripps and Walsh on the inside when somebody's tackling them constantly. They just can't get the ball out like they would like to. So, he was fantastic. Just plays up and down the games. I think it's less luck that we got him. I think it's complete and utter incompetence on the part of St Kilda. Yeah. They went out on a huge spending spree to get De Koning and Ryan and Flanders
Silvani.
and Silvani, and I think they pushed themselves into a corner and said, "Oh my goodness, we're going to go over salary cap here. We've got to do something. Who do we get rid of? Oh, let's get rid of a 30-year-old captain." Well, that was a great idea. So I don't. Given that the others are defenders, rucks, and a forward, I don't know that Flanders is all that great a replacement for Jack Steele. For what you're getting out of what we're getting out of him. So, yeah, he's just inside doing that hard work. And, in the absence of Oliver, Petrarca and Viney, we certainly needed him, and we will need him for the rest of this season to be able to hold that midfield together in those heavy contested situations.
It was unbelievable, wasn't he? I mean, I probably underestimated his impact. How, he shut down Cripps, Ruby Q notes that he went to Cripps, but not only did he shut down Cripps, took him out of the game. And I think George's point about the way, the change to way Maxi getting out probably helped as well. But not only did he shut down Cripps, he got the ball himself. And he was damaging himself. That mark he took where he got crunched in the back was a really, a really telling mark. We were crying out for leaders, weren't we? Yeah. And we're able to bring in a player who's not just a leader, who's also can play at the level he's playing. I mean, it's already, it feels like it's one of the best pickups since Langdon, in terms of trading in a player who you just go, I love him as a Demon.
I posted on Demonland earlier in the year, there was a stat from last year. He was the second highest tackler, I think, cumulative or average or both, behind Atkins of Geelong. And you can see 16 tackles. That's exactly what you get.
16 tackles.
That's
speaking of tackles,
numbers.
How was that? Sorry, Eddie, speaking of tackles, how was that tackle speaking of Cripps as well, of Cully on Cripps?
Yeah,
Woo!
Yeah. Cully had a good game. I had been somewhat disappointed in the first couple of games of Cully, and obviously he's coming off a broken arm. So, just after the preseason that he had, we were all of us track watchers at training were in awe of Cully, and had him down as one of the guys who was going to make a big impact this year. And then he broke his arm, and he possibly because of that he was a bit, he hadn't played for a couple of weeks. So the first few games he hadn't been as impressive as what we'd seen at training. So it was really good to see, because what we saw on the weekend was those glimpses that we saw at training, and it was really good to see. And I'm now a bit more enthused about Cully and what he's going to bring to the table for the next couple of weeks and into this year. So, he's a really good pickup for us, and I'm glad that we saw what we've been seeing at training out on the field. So, yeah. Dark Horse writes, I want to discuss the role of CJ. I watched him live in Perth, and his decision-making and kicking were terrible, well above other clangers by teammates. The question is, did we improve our ball movement once CJ went off injured? Watching on TV, we often link through CJ early in the game, and then his kicks weren't good, even to teammates that he did actually hit up. Is there a correlation between his absence and our ability to transition the ball better? Or was it simply the Blues falling into their hole after quarter time? Hard to tell from just watching on TV. And what replies to that one, saying CJ going down meant the Colt went to the back flank role, where he was pretty calm and careful with ball usage. Removing Colt from his tag on Cripps opened up our midfield in the third term. So, Binman, what are your thoughts on CJ? Granted, he's injured and he'll spend some time on the sidelines now. I think it's 3 to 4 weeks. Is there any correlation between his injury and the subsequent absence and our ability to move the ball better out of defence, or is it just a coincidence that happened?
Yeah, I would put that under the confusing cause and effect fallacy, or reversing causality. It's a logical error where a person assumes A causes B when in fact B causes A. It's
excuse me.
No is the short answer. I don't think that there was any correlation, or the fact that he went off. I've got some good mates who are Hawthorn fans, and they're just laughing at his errors. I think it's really interesting because I really believe that they selected him for a specific reason, because they want to play this overlap handball game. He's played 80 games AFL footy, more maybe. He was in the Hawthorn side for most of last season, and he was sub for their 2 finals games last year. Nothing, like eyes wide open, King and the team, when they brought him in, they knew exactly what they were going to get. I really believe that they brought him in because precisely his strengths is what we need. His weaknesses are well known. That first turnover he did was just like a it was hard to even think how he did it, because there wasn't a Melbourne player within 25 metres of the Carlton player he hit. Like, it was almost as if it looked like he confused the play. Maybe he's colourblind, and then he sort of sees blue and red and blue, or I don't know. But I don't think we improved our ball movement because he went off. I think as the game they fatigued, we were able to move the ball. And I'll make a point about sort of it's easier to hit players when they're open, isn't it, than hitting players in traffic. And so as the game wore on, our ball use improves because we're getting more space. In terms of, I thought it was interesting that Colt went back. I thought he played good in the back half. I wasn't convinced about him, his performance up until that. It looks CJ's maybe a couple of weeks, calf injury.
It said 3 to 4 weeks the injury list came out. And Cross, did you know, he broke his thumb in the game. He's out for 5 to 6 weeks.
It couldn't. How bad luck is that? It's a bit like Jeffo last year, coming in 1 week and going out the next. And I think they brought Cross in, or I guess there's a question. I won't cut the George's lunch on that one. But CJ's going to be a player like Frosty, isn't he? He's going to cause us lots of angst, and he'll be in and out of the team. And
he has no problem getting the ball. I think he's excellent at that. It's sometimes his decision making or the execution. I don't know if it's decision making, because I think he's going to the right person. It's the execution at time lets him down. So we'll see. I don't know if you can. I don't know if you can improve that, but we'll see. He can be exciting.
I can't recall if I mentioned this. I can't remember if I said this on the pod, but there was a goal that we kicked against the Saints that was purely because of his preparedness. He got it in the back half. The goal that I did talk about it. The goal that Latrell kicked, where he bounced it 6 times or whatever, that was set up by CJ taking on, getting it deep in our D50, being prepared to run and carry a little bit, break a tackle, and then take on a high-risk kick. We kick a goal, and that's what King wants, obviously. So, if it's good enough for King, he's good enough for me. It's a pity he's out, so it's Bowser can't come back in quick enough, and it'll be fascinating to see whether AMW gets a run this week. But
we'll talk about the selections and stuff in a moment. There's Rivers also to come back, and that's what we're discussing now. Dominion asks, would love to get the panel's thoughts on the dropping of Trent Rivers. Was this the coach putting his money where his mouth is in regards to the statement he made at the first meeting with the playing group that selection is a blank slate, given that CJ will likely be sidelined with a calf injury? Does this open the door for a return without a game at Casey to earn it back? And D. Old Fart writes, huge thanks for the weekly pod, guys. As an interstate member, I value them enormously. My question relates to team selection versus Gold Coast. Does Riv come straight back in for CJ? Or will Rivers be required to serve at least a week at Casey to earn his place back? If it's the latter, who comes into the 23 for CJ? P.S. In my opinion, the Casey bye after one round compromises D's selection greatly. If Casey had played and AMW had a blinder, he would have been right up there for selection. So, George, we can get to the compromised VFL fixture and what that means for the match readiness and development of players pressing for senior selection in a moment. But first, what do you make of Rivers actually being dropped? Kingy did mention after the game that there was some minor injury concerns, but does the omission still reinforce the idea that under this coaching group there are no favourites, no guaranteed selections, and every week is effectively almost a blank slate. And from here, do you expect Rivers to come straight back in for CJ this week? And if you want to discuss the VFL fixture and how that impacts a guy like AMW, but please go on.
I was a little bit confused about why Cross came in, why Rivers went out. I suspect there was an injury component to it rather than anything else, especially when Rivers has been playing not only as a back but as a mid as well. And certainly we saw the fragility of the mids against Fremantle. So I'm not quite sure why Rivers was dropped, and I can only think of the injury as being the real reason. I was just as equally confused as to why Cross came in. This was a player who wasn't on the list 4 weeks ago. He's played one game at Casey this year where he got grand total of 11 disposals. In the same game, people like Henderson had 18, Berry had 9, Laurie 16, Mentha 15, AMW 32, even Onley had 10. What was so special about Cross's game that he comes into the side? And like I said, he hasn't had a pre-season. What was it that he bought that the others didn't? I am completely flummoxed about that. I don't think he made a great contribution in this game in the sense that up to the final, he had 3 possessions up to the final quarter, which were all in the first quarter.
That goal was pretty special.
He got a goal in the last quarter, and that's great. That's great. But I just don't see what he brought to the game, unfortunately. Yeah. And I don't know what they saw in him, like after one game at Casey, being on the list without a pre-season. It's just baffling to me. Sorry.
Maybe just.
It won't surprise you to know, George, that I've got a theory on that, and this is why I think he was also brought into the senior side. Onto the list. I've got no doubt the reason was leg speed. Like it is. It is all about leg speed. It's all about tank. He's got a massive tank Cross. So he was our average speed and attack in this game, which is measured. It's a bit sort of counterintuitive, but it's measured when you have your team has the ball. His average speed and attack was 9.1 kilometres, the fastest of any player on the side. Number 2 was Latrell Pickett, 9. And for me, that's it in a nutshell. Like he was brought in for leg speed. I've got a feeling Rivers was taken out of the side because he is slow, Rivers. He's not quick over the ground. And if he's got an injury that's making that more difficult, I think it's probably as simple as that. So you take a slow player out, you replace him with a quick player who covers ground. He covered a lot of ground as well, Cross. His pressure was really terrific. He was, and the other thing that he was, and I've noted this when I watched him live at Casey, he's fit as a fiddle, but he's also really prepared to jump at the ball, and he's really good aerially. And he
did it a few times at the
twice,
game, yeah.
And twice we scored a goal because he brought it to ground.
Yep. Not
Rue, not one of the other forwards, him, including a critical one in the last quarter. But I think the key factor is exactly what he's 9.1 kilometres speed in attack is the critical reason. And he's really unlucky to have got injured because he would have kept his spot in the team. I'm almost certain. And it's, I think it's a bit of like the conversation we were having a few years ago with Koz. He brought into play a role, and I think that was why Rivers went out. I think slow coaches need not apply anymore for the Melbourne Footy Club. He wants players who have got a big tank and who can run fast. And Rivers has got a pretty good tank, but he's not quick over the ground. And if he's got any sort of leg injury that makes him even slower, he's probably not coming back into the side in a hurry, I reckon.
Well, so CJ goes out this week, and so does Cross, who replaces them if it's not Rivers, because Rivers is almost like for like in terms of positional things. Do we bring in Xavier Taylor for the half back? AMW.
Taylor's not. He's not. I reckon AMW is a shot.
So. Yep.
But Taylor's not coming back in. I don't think.
He hasn't come in yet.
Yeah. The other options. They might shuffle things around. Kentfield is available.
Is he back this week?
And Disco is also a test.
Oh, Disco's a test. I didn't see
they
that
think
one.
They think that he has recovered well.
Okay.
From his hand injury, so he might.
Does that mean TMax comes out?
No, well, if CJ comes out, I think Disco would be the natural replacement for him.
Mm.
Yeah, it'd be interesting with if they do that. It'd be tough on TMac, couldn't it? The other thing, just on Paddy Cross, he was also just looking at. He ran 9 kilometres in defence when the Blues had the ball, more than Langdon. So Langdon ran 8.7 kilometres when they had the ball. Only 2 the top 5 players were Hollands, Cross, Langdon, Evans and Smith. And so that running power and defending the ground, both and on offense and defense, is what he brings to the table. And you need multiple players who can do that sort of running. I don't know whether AMW has that in him. He looked pretty fit. I'll be interested to see whether I've got a feeling they want him in the side. They have him best 22. I think I was saying to you, Andy, that I reckon he's got a really clear sense of his best 23, King, and I reckon Kenfield's in it. I reckon AMW's in it. Rivers, he also made very clear in the press conference, King, I thought that Rivers isn't going to be playing anything but a few minutes as a midfielder. He talked him about as a defender, not a midfielder. So he's got to make it as a halfback flanker. I mean, of course, it'd be shocking to see him not come back into the side at some stage, but I just got a feeling like he won't come back in this week. Rivers, I mean.
All right, well, let's get into the preview of the Gold Coast game. The Demons are back at the MCG for the second week in a row. They face the Suns off a 15-day break without their prized recruit and former Demon champion Christian Petrarca. They'll also be without future Demon Bailey Humphrey. Well, we can dream about that, who is serving a 2-week suspension, but they may see the return of reigning Brownlow medalist Matt Rowell. I'm not sure. I haven't seen any injury reports from them. But
he's on test for this week.
He'll be back. You know that he will. Yeah. And he'll bolster their already formidable midfield. This will be a massive test for the Demons, who will be facing a genuine premiership, not just contender, but probably one of the favourites at the moment, and certainly the media's darling. Talk about coaches that do their homework. Damien Hardwick certainly does that, and he'll have been looking at the Ds and any tricks that they do to get the ball on the outside in the rucks, and he'll be prepared for that too. So, he's not going to have his arms folded on the boundary line and not do anything about it in the last quarter. I can tell you that right now. So, B-Man, followed by George, you want to take it away with your preview of this week's match?
Obviously a tough game, and we're playing a genuine top 4 team, aren't we? I think I don't know if they're favourites for the flag, but it wouldn't surprise me if they are. They're likely to be, first or second favourites. The weather's going to be nice. It's going to be 24 degrees.
Beautiful.
Yeah, lovely. The betting in this game is probably not a million miles off. We're $3.37 to win the game and $1.33 they are. But it's really 3 big outs, like having Petrarca, Humphrey, and the sort of, my sense is, Rowell's probably unlikely to play. I mean, that would be the equivalent, in our heyday of having Oliver, Viney, and in that 21 era of having Oliver, Viney, and Trackall not playing. So, I've been banging on about this for a long time. I don't think teams are as strong as what you take out the 3 best players from any team and you're going to struggle. You take out Bont from the Dogs, they are not going to be as likely to win a game of footy. So I reckon those odds are out of whack, to be honest. Don't trust me on Melbourne games in terms of betting, but I just think that doesn't stack up. The one area that I think that they're playing a really forward half game under Hardwick, and so funnily enough, I think King and Hardwick are similar. The difference is we're going crazy with long handballs. AFL average is 400 metres gained by handball. We had 157 metres gained in the third quarter against the Blues. We'll look to do that. They're less of a forward handballing side, but they like to get it deep. They've one of the areas, they've got a whole bunch of number 1 rankings. They're number 1 in handballs per game, number 3 in disposals. We're a low disposal team. We're low handballing. We're long handballing. So that's a big difference in the game. They're the high scoring team so far. This is the one that I think they're number 1 in inside 50s, number 1 for goal assists per game, number 1 for opponent inside 50s per game. That speaks to the way they like to play, get it forward, trap it forward. Very much a territory team, very much like Melbourne in 21. Hardwick's got them playing, and it doesn't, shouldn't be a surprise because Goodwin based his game plan on Hardwick's 2017 to whatever it was Tigers team. The thing where I think they match us a bit with the rucks. Witts is a great ruck, I reckon. He's number 1 in the AFL, or they're number 1 in the AFL for hit-outs per game, even more than Maxi, or more than us. So there's obviously it's going to be a tough game. I hope we really attack them, and with the run, we've got a week to prepare. We don't have to travel; they have to travel. So, I go in with a relative level of confidence. I think those odds are a bit out of whack. I'd give us a much better shot at that. I'm looking forward to it. It's a pity. I don't know about you guys. I'd prefer track to be playing. I was looking forward to seeing track play, and I was curious to see what sort of reception you'd get from D's fans. I can't wait. I'll be able to go to this particular game, so I'll be there. And it was really notable on this interview that King did with on SEN. He was really encouraging Melbourne fans to get to the ground, and let's make this a cauldron where other teams don't like coming, and let's really get, I think if we can do our job to support the team. King made the point that the players really do lift and really do notice when the supporters get behind them, and he said that was really evident on Saturday. He said the vibe from the crowd was terrific. So, I wouldn't say I'm going in with great confidence that we'll roll them, but, that's the exciting thing about a rebuild, refresh, reset, whatever you want to call this season, is that, we go in with if we lose, we lose. I don't think we'll get blown away. It'll be a high-scoring game, I think. So that will be exciting. The great thing about beating Blues and then the Saints is the same. I said this about the Freo game. Is it's not the worst we're going to be after this round is 2 and 3. So no, what is it? How many go 4, 2 and 2. So. That augurs well. I think, it's a bit like having a free hit. Super looking forward to it. Selection will be interesting. I think AMW will come back in. I'll be curious to see whether Disco comes back in too.
George, anything you add? Yep.
Yeah, I think the biggest impediment to us in this game is Witts. He consistently nullifies Max, for want of a better word. Certainly in the ruck contests around the ground, I think Max has got more with his marking ability than Witts. But we're in a fortunate position because if they have Rowell, Anderson, Tuke Miller, Bailey Humphrey and Petrarca in the middle, there'd be, wouldn't even be considering that we'd be competitive in this game. But without Petrarca and Humphrey, we've got a reasonable chance, so to speak. Ben King up forward is going to be a problem, and that's why I think TMax will have to stay in the side. We certainly don't want Lever having to try cover him. He is a really seriously good full forward, and he does not miss when he's kicking. So give him the chance. He will absolutely take you by the throat. They're running the Hardwick plan that was so successful in Richmond's good years. They've got the talent all over the ground. It'll be a really good measure of where we actually sit in this season. Despite the fact that we came back so well against Carlton, despite the fact that we got over St Kilda, you really got to play those top sides to find out where your real ability lies in terms of your pecking order on the ladder. So it'll be a really good game. It'll be an entertaining game from a fan's point of view. So looking forward to it.
All right. Well, I think that's where we're going to leave it for tonight. Almost hitting 2 hours. And I think we discussed a bit our Schadenfreude about Carlton a little bit too much, and perhaps that's what's kicked us over. So don't hold that against us, anyone who is looking for a shorter show. As I mentioned earlier, I'm not going to be here for the next few weeks while I jet out of Australia. There'll be no main podcast for the Suns, Bombers and Lions match. Big Man will present his Stats Files podcast during those weeks, and perhaps he will take some questions in some form or another, or even just address some of the main non-stat issues in those weeks. Look out for the extended Stats File podcast in the coming days if you enjoy a deeper dive into all the stats that matter from the Blues game. Thank you to our 5-star reviewer on Apple Podcasts. That was Wiley D. So thank you. Thank you to our commenters on Facebook and X. That was Ruby Q and Demon Faithful. And as always, your questions and comments are an integral part of the show. So thank you to our Demonland posters who submitted questions and comments. That's thank you to GS77, Clintosaurus, Doug Reamer, Bigfoot, D-Star 9, Gorn of the Dead, Mandalorian, Spirit of Norm Smith, Tolstoy's Nudge, Rue, Lazy, Lakeside Oval, Lefty, El Diablo 14, Smurf, Pingu, Despicable Me, Skrull, Ilbato, Master Chief, Dark Horse 72, What, Say What, D-Minion, D-Old Fart, Monocular, Rivers of Belief, My Friend, Red and Blue Beard, Dutch Demon, Ain't Saint, D-Rev and Whispering Jack. A couple of those didn't get to your questions, but we thank you for your contributions nonetheless. And thank you to my co-hosts, George and Big-Man, and thank you to you, our loyal listeners. Don't forget, leave us a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcasts, and we will read it out on the show and give you that shout-out. Go Demons!
Go Red Leggers!
It's a grand old flag, it's a high-flying flag, it's an emblem for me and for you. Well, it's the emblem of the team we love, the team of the red and the blue. Well, every heart beats true for the red and the blue, as we sing a song for you. Should old acquaintance be forgot, the red and the blue. Well, the team played fine in the year 39. We're the team that no one can lick. And you'll find us there after the final bell with the spirit of 1926. Well, every heart beats true for the red and the blue, as we finish sing this song to you. Should old acquaintance be forgotten,